Thanks for watching Off the Screen Magazine, or sorry, Off the Screen TV. I'm John Brooker. I'm here with Carey McKenzie, the director of the new crime thriller, Cold Harbour. Hi Carey, thanks so much for talking to me.
Thank you.
What was the inspiration of the film? I know you wrote it as well.
A bunch of different things. I had newly returned to Cape Town after living in the States for a while, and I kept seeing these stories about the abalone poaching, abalone, and smuggling, and it was interesting to me because it was so uniquely a crime scene that was particular to Cape Town, also because of the involvement of the Chinese gangs, and the stories kept raising this issue of police corruption. And I've, some of my favorite films are the genre thrillers from the 70s.
Yes.
Films like Bullet with Steve McQueen, and Get Carter, the original with Michael Caine.
Yes.
And of course Chinatown. And and I really wanted to do to create a South African hero along those kind of classic lines. A sexy, cool, and dangerous Steve McQueen, African Steve McQueen guy.
Yes.
So that this thing started to gestate from there. Then I go out jogging and I saw a man's leg on the rocks.
Lovely.
Wearing a tube sock, can you believe it? I was staying close to the sea, and it's on False Bay.
Yes.
And I saw these policemen, and they're kind of like searching the rocks for other bits of this man, and I was just, of course I made up all these fantastical scenarios in my head about who it was. It turned out to be a fisherman who had been washed off the rocks and eaten by sharks on the way across the bay, I think. But that got me started on this idea of a body kind of being the trigger that unravels a whole larger scenario.
So obviously the reports that you saw about the abalone smuggling have a lot to do with the Chinese.
Yes, I mean it's a twofold thing. There's supply and demand. So the poachers are local, and they are selling, and sometimes this involves men diving at night, diving in groups to try and avoid sharks. I mean, the crazy stuff goes on, and then selling the abalone to the Chinese, who come from Taiwan and from Hong Kong. Now Cape Town is controlled by the Table Mountain Gang. Yes. Which is a hilarious name, but anyway. But there was a period in the 90s when I was doing my research that I learned about when there was actually a gang war between two rival Chinese triad factions over who would control this supply, who would basically get the gold that was the abalone, that is the abalone. I mean, on the one hand, this has environmental implications because the abalone's being destroyed and it's affecting the ecosystem and those issues. I think for most people in the city, the more urgent question is what's happening in the communities, because on one level organized crime always has a kind of ripple of violence around it, but also the trade is now a trade in kind, and so abalone goes out, or perlman goes out, and drugs come in.
Yes. And
that's having an enormously negative effect on the communities in Cape Town.
Absolutely. We see a bit of that in the film as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. With the Chinese aspect, explain to me getting Yunnan involved. Was she always the idea of who you wanted to be that character, or did it just work out that way?
I knew I wanted a Chinese actress from China, and not a Chinese actress from England or America, or I wanted her to be Chinese, because part of what the film is doing is kind of talking about this collision or engagement of two cultures, and I needed her to have a Chinese voice and Chinese body language, and just really have the culture in herself. We explored different options. I mean, of course I had this wish list of really famous Chinese actresses, and it's a supporting role and it wasn't realistic, and then I saw Yunnan, and in kind of just exploring, learning about different actresses. I saw Yunnan in a film called 2 Years Marriage, or 2 Years Wedding, which had won the Golden Bear in Berlin.
Yes.
I think it won probably around 2006, thereabouts. And she plays a Mongolian peasant, and she disappeared into this role. I mean, she was a Mongolian peasant. And then I see the pictures of Yunnan on the red carpet at the Berlinale, and she's a starlet, and she's glamorous, and I was like, okay, so she could become this character. So I knew she had the acting capability.
Yes.
We spoke over Skype, But when she came to South Africa, she'd never been to Africa. And she came with her a dresser and assistant, Surantea, who's from Tibet, who didn't speak a word of English. And when she first arrived, contractually, she's represented by CAA China.
Yeah.
And so contractually, they required, because their experience in South Africa is, Leonardo DiCaprio comes.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So they all have security that follows you into the toilet. You know what I mean? It's hardcore. And credit to her, like not really knowing the lay of the land at all. We really couldn't afford this 24-hour security, right? So it's like, oh please God, she'll get over it. And within 24 hours, she's like, I don't need that guy. Of course, it was our incredibly macho crew that made her feel so safe.
Well, that's always good. Africa's big rugby players.
Yes. And Tony.
And Tony.
Tony.
What kind of research did you do for the film? I know you wrote it as well, especially in terms of the police action and the procedures and that type of stuff. What kind of research did you do? Did you have a technical advisor on this? We
set? Did. We had a police advisor on the set. Tony also spent a day with a detective in Langa, which I think was really valuable. And it meant that with little details of how things were done, we'd be in the middle of doing a scene and Tony would say, no, that's not, I got to do it like this. I was like, okay, great. And Dion also was incredibly thorough on his research and actually alerted me to, I'd done my research when I was writing, and then, between me writing the script and us getting into production, they changed the rank structure of SAPs.
Yes.
And Dion, once he started his research, was like, oh, I think you got the ranks wrong, blah, 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 it's going to be this and that. And, so that was the police aspect, and the police were really helpful, which was, does them a lot of credit.
Absolutely.
And there are actually quite a lot of off-duty police officers as extras. When you see uniforms in the background, they're quite often real policemen. And my car became the police car. And on the Cape Flats, police cars can be the target of all kinds of things. So I had these, they put these stripes on the car. I have a VW Polo. It can be any car, just a white car.
Yes.
So, and it was cheaper. It was my car. It was free, right? So I didn't have to rent a car for it. So I had these stripes, and then when I would get to set, they would put the actual crest and the actual police bits with magnets on it. But it was kind of hilarious driving this kind of semi-police. Anyway, it's like, will I get caught for speeding? Anyway,
working that closely with the police, the end product. Pretty much every single police officer in the film is dirty, is corrupt. I mean, that's the way it works out at the end of the film. Do you think that's a good message to be passing on locally and internationally? And also, have you had any response from the police who were involved heavily with the film and were in it as to what they think about that aspect of it?
They saw an earlier version of the script. They didn't see the final script, and obviously the film changes as you shoot and as you edit as well. But in what they read, the Fenske character, Dion's character, was always corrupt.
Yes.
And so essential to the story that that's something that didn't change. In terms of a message, when we were cutting the film, there was the tragedy at Maracana, and I'd been in a debate with my editor about the ending, and should it be this dark or what about something more hopeful? And then Maracana happened, and the debate just went away. It's like, it is not, our job as filmmakers is to respond to our environment and to respond to our time. And it's not a rom-com, and it's not a commercial.
Yes.
So I'm not doing PR for the South African police. I'm trying to represent what South Africans experience in their daily reality. And I grew up under apartheid, so I'm someone who will never trust a uniform because that was my experience as a girl. The cops were kind of lecherous and violent and dangerous people, and I feel like that's still in our culture. There are all kinds of issues around the police which we can't begin to get into here, but I feel like SAPS has to earn our trust. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
We're not living in a culture where we automatically trust the police as an organisation that's there to protect and serve us. They need to convince us.
Yes.
So, way to go.
Yeah. A large subplot of the film as well, moving slightly away from the police itself, does with the which is quite big at the moment, with Cloudy Mutsing at the SABC and various other places, where the people who were involved in the struggle are being put into positions of power without any real qualifications per se. Now, it's not quite the same in this film, but you do have the schoolless Sizwe being put into a detective position, and I mean, even Fensky, he's worried about his job because he's white face, and all these different things. Was that something that you specifically wanted to put in the script, or did that just kind of happen organically as you were working on it?
Both. I'm very interested by Code Savona, and when people, whether they're gangsters or under apartheid, the comrades, the MK comrades,
yes.
When people operate outside the law, very often I've noticed they create their own laws.
Yes.
They create their own internal codes,
yes, absolutely,
to control behavior. So it could be the mafia, it could be the triad, it could be the gangs on the Cape Flats, vows of silence, bonds of friendship. There's something quite romantic about it in gangster culture, which is why gangster stories are a staple of cinema.
Yes, yes.
Because this idea of my word is my bond, it's kind of an old school honor.
Family above anything else.
Exactly,
yes.
right? So they're not randomly violent and immoral people at
yes.
all. They have their own. And it was during the Shabir Sheikh trial, he spoke about having gone after, solicited bribes on behalf of Jacob Zuma with such confidence, as if he really, truly believed that he had done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And that was very striking to me because, once you unpack it, you see that as a comrade, within the culture of the comrades, the first priority is to look after your comrade, right? And that he'd done that.
Yeah.
He had gone out and he put himself out in the best interests of his comrade.
Yes.
The fact that under the democratic laws of the democratic South Africa that is now illegal,
yes.
was secondary to him. And so that's interesting to me, that kind of conflict of interests. I mean, I think with Sizwe being, becoming a detective as someone who doesn't have an education, I don't think that's quite the same as a kind of nepotistical scenario about, just hiring people or
yes.
people you're comrades with, because I think he earns it, but he earns it on the street.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
He does have the chops to do that job. So in a way, there's merit, there's just not a trick.
Yes, yes. The way you see it more is definitely the relationship between Sizwe and Sentinel. Not Sentinel.
And Specialist.
Specialist, sorry.
Well, that was very interesting, because I'd written this, and then, I'd always wanted Tony to play Sizwe. And then Moonin Lee, who was our casting director, suggested Fana for Specialist, and it was like, oh wow, what an idea, it's brilliant. And then I learned, from the two of them that they'd actually been comrades together, and so that their real life backstory echoed that of their characters, and that was just such a gift, because it means that. Not only that, just that they have a friendship, and they have those. Tony and Fana have a relationship that goes back years and has all this history, and I feel like it meant that we didn't have to tell much of the backstory, because it's just kind of there.
Yeah, and it does. It translates beautifully onto the screen. You can see immediately that repartee between the two of them is stunning. Yeah. Going back to the film slightly, the cinematography of the film, it's quite bland. Very white, the whole way through. I know you were looking for it very white. If you understand what I mean, like there's a film across it. The colours don't stand out. There's,
okay.
Yes.
I worry about the print you
That's
saw.
what I saw. It was
There's no film across it.
It's a beautiful film.
They're very
it looks
strong
stunning.
blacks, actually.
Yeah, I know. Look, I know you were looking.
It's desaturated.
You were looking for a
like
very.
this, it's desaturated.
Yeah. The colours don't stand out. That's kind of what I'm talking about. You were looking for a very film noir feel for it. What was the thinking behind that? Why did you want to go into that kind of a, rather than going into the more the more commercialized colours popping type feel of it?
Because the film's about someone who gets lost in a moral marsh, in a kind of quagmire, right? Where good men do bad things and bad men do good things, where everything is uncertain.
Yes.
And, the original film noirs were black and white.
Yes.
And it's this world, this imaginative world, is all about the shadow part of the psyche
Mm-hmm.
and the shadow part of our society. So it was always, noir is all about shadow in the foreground, and
Yes, absolutely.
It's dark.
Mhm.
It's going to be dark.
Mhm.
And my DP Shane Daly is someone who's not afraid of the dark.
Yeah.
And happily now we have the technology to actually film, even with a limited budget, to be
Mhm.
able to work with, the HD has an extraordinary latitude, so you can actually do that kind of thing.
Yes, yes.
But the desaturation thing it's an aesthetic choice.
Mhm.
It's the Cape Town that these characters inhabit is not a colourful holiday destination.
Yes.
That's just not their experience of the city, and I don't think it's for many Cape Townians that's not their experience. So
the desaturation look of the film goes in so much as becoming part of the film, as a character in the film.
sure. Well, I think I hope the city is a character in the film.
Mm.
And when Cape Town is a beautiful place, but it's also a place with a lot of poverty and
Yes, yeah,
violence.
absolutely.
And so I wanted to have those extremes juxtaposed.
Mm.
But I think, it's a choice.
Yeah. The very first scene when you start with the credits and you've got the aerial shot of the harbour moving across, it's stunning. I mean, it opens up the
Kudos
film.
to Giulio Beccari, who has an enormous. He's one of our leading DPs in South Africa.
Yes.
And as a favour, we had to do an extra day of shooting, and
Yes.
Shane was gone,
Yeah.
and Giulio was just so kind about it. And did that out of a helicopter without a rig.
Wow.
So he's just like wearing a seatbelt in the back of a helicopter holding a camera.
Well,
And
it works. This is
I was terrified. Anyway, yeah. And also just hats off to our post-production team, because it was a bumpier ride than it looks. And that was a lot of work. So,
Wow.
yeah, that is
Well,
what-
Carey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a great film, and all the best, and
Thank
best
you
wishes
so
for
much.
everything. Thanks so much.
Great.